I want to welcome everyone. This is our Washington School Counselors Association recognized ASCA model program cohort. We are a committee, Deb Rodon and I, with the Washington School Counselors Association, and our passion is to have Washington school counselors seek RAMP designation for professional development and also to benefit students. And we've held a series of meetings. This particular meeting is on the school counseling core curriculum, action plan, and lesson plans. And right off the bat, I'll let you know that I am not an absolute expert on this. I'll tell you what I know, and hopefully that will generate some discussion. But please do not be afraid to jump in. Those of you that are on this video live, don't be afraid to jump in with questions or comments. Some of the power really does come out of interacting with other school counseling professionals. So, and Deb, don't be afraid to jump in at any point. The first thing I want you to know is we're meeting on GoToMeeting. If you are having any difficulty with the technology, don't be afraid to speak up or email me afterwards, and we'll see if we can get that corrected. Our group also has a Dropbox, and we've put electronic files and examples in the Dropbox. That's the goal, is that over time more and more school counselors would add their lesson plans, their goals, and other documents to the Dropbox, and we will get stronger by sharing. And if you do not have access to our Dropbox and you'd like it, just drop an email to Deb or I, and we'll connect you. We have got some feedback to maybe move the Dropbox files over to Google Drive or another cloud-based solution. We might do that eventually, just haven't got there yet. All right, moving forward. So what we're going to talk about is the school counseling core curriculum action plan. And as most of you are probably familiar, this is part of the ASCA national model. We are focusing on RAMP, but really think of them as one and the same. RAMP is simply, I call it the prove it, prove that you have an ASCA national model. And what I like about RAMP and the RAMP process is that the rubric serves as a guide. I'm kind of a simple person, and I like guides and checklists, and so it really helps me with that. So if you go to the RAMP rubric, I've got a link here in my handout, and I can't email anybody my handout. This is the RAMP rubric. RAMP is a 12-point rubric. We're going to scroll down to the school counseling core curriculum. Try not to get vertigo as I do that. All right. Here we go. Almost there. Advisory calendars and school counseling core curriculum. So the first thing, whenever you're tackling RAMP, you want to look at that rubric. Your rubric is your guide. So here's what it says. The school counseling core curriculum action plan, it details all the lessons that you're going to give to your students. And here's something I've learned. I learned it the hard way, but if you look at the top of the document, we'll look at it in a minute, you've got a big overarching goal for students in your programs, and then think of that as the umbrella at the top, and then beneath that are your lessons. So your lessons are working to help you accomplish a larger overall goal for students, and that goal is going to be to improve achievement, school safety, discipline, that sort of thing. So that's really what we're talking about. And if you look at the narrative here, what we're looking for is your action plan should be highly comprehensive in scope and developmentally appropriate. Basically what that means to me is that you should be addressing all your grade levels, all your students, and you know, we all do this, but your curriculum should be targeted for your particular grade level. This is especially true, I would think, at the elementary grades, where your kindergarten student and your 6th grade student have very different needs, and you plan that curriculum accordingly. Next, you can see the second bullet there. I'm looking at the second bullet. The lessons should address a broad variety of topics. So again, this is driven by your school data, but you're going to want some lessons that cover your academic domain, your career domain, and also that social emotional domain. That's what they're looking for, and driven by the student data. That'll guide your decisions. That next one there, number 3, all students in the school are clearly affected by the lessons in the plan. So that of course is that all that we talk about in school counseling. All your students should be benefiting from the school counseling program, and so it would be a problem, for instance, if there was a grade level that wasn't receiving lessons, or you'd certainly have to have a very good explanation for as to why. We're going to talk about this when we get into the template, but all the lessons should enable the students to master the learning objectives. And then the lesson plans are going to have a highly detailed plan for evaluation. And again, you will see that in the template when we get to that. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like. I think I have it on my desktop here. Let's see here. When you have one of these webinars, you should probably clean up your desktop, probably. Let's see here. Actually, I'm going to do one better. I'm going to give you an example. So here's an example. Oh, and this is important. If you go to the ASCA RAMP website, I just Google it, ASCA RAMP. Yeah, there is a section under resources where you can look at exemplary RAMP applications. So these are folks that have already earned RAMP designation. They've uploaded all their examples and information so you can take a look. So here's the core curriculum action plan. You're looking at one. This happens to be a high school example. I will show an elementary example for fairness, but you can see at the top there, I should back up. So this template can be downloaded from the RAMP website, and you're typing right onto the template. And the first thing you're going to type is your goal. So again, remember, as I mentioned earlier, your goal is an overarching kind of big umbrella goal. And you can see this is a high school, and they said 1.95% of ESOL level students will remain in school and progress toward full completion of graduation requirements. So again, that's a big overarching goal, students maintaining their status toward graduation. That would make a lot of sense at a high school. You can also see that they have a secondary goal there of the students, the seniors in particular, completing a post-secondary plan. So again, big overarching goals, real broad, large percentages. And then underneath that, we can see their lessons. You can, whoops, look at vertigo. So you can scroll down. I'm scrolling across, but you can see the one that there at the top, the 9th grade. Then they have a lesson on sexual harassment and bullying that looked like they delivered to grades 9, 10, and 11. And then it keeps going. You can see grades for 10, or lessons rather, excuse me, for grades 10, 11, 12, another lesson there at the bottom for grades 9 through 11. So you can see that in terms of scope and sequence, they're delivering a lot of lessons, covering a lot of grade levels. You can also see a variety of topics. Just at a glance, you can see a closing the gap, you can see a senior orientation, a career unit, and then at the beginning we have the freshman transition and sexual harassment and bullying, all pretty typical high school lessons. So you'd be filling this document. This document is your core curriculum action plan. So let's break it down just real quickly. So you've got your topic here, just a quick topic at a glance so that a reader can quickly identify what is this lesson about. Then which class or subject are you going in? So sometimes we're going into PE classes, English classes. You might be going into an advisory or a homeroom. Where is the lesson being delivered? Next year, you're hitting your ASCA standards and competencies. Now, just to be clear, those of you that are serious about applying for RAMP, if you're applying this year, this October, you'll use the old standards. If you're applying in October 2016, you use the mindsets of behavior. This template's an old template. After that, you'll see a curriculum and materials. If you're, for instance, using a purchased curriculum or a research-based curriculum, purchased research-based curriculum, you would indicate that, or if you're counselor-generated. Your start date, your process data, of course, you probably remember that's how many students. Your perception data, typically pre-post. And then your outcome data gets into more of that raw data having to do with student achievement, school safety, behavior, attendance, and then you can see the contact person. So that essentially is the core curriculum action plan. Think of it as that big picture. I want that big picture of what's happening for students at that particular school with all grade levels, covering all domains. At a quick glance, I can get a big picture. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to drill down into the actual lesson plans. So are there any questions about, I know I went over that very quickly, but most of you have probably seen this. Are there questions about the school counseling core curriculum action plan?
I have a question. Who, your contact person at the end,
Yeah.
who are the contact people that we should place for each of the lessons?
That's an excellent question. I presume that is referring to the actual counselor that delivered the lessons, and it's probably more applicable to those that are working with a team. If you're an elementary counselor or a middle school counselor and you're it, then that's you. but if you're at a high school, it's probably referring to the person that delivered the lessons. For instance, we break up who on our team is going to be responsible for which grade levels. So real good question. The other thing that I want to mention, and this is the value of really this cohort and us having conversations, is that putting these types of documents is in my opinion, not very easy and not very much fun. And really, it's the doing that's important. You just got to practice at it and give it a shot. And ideally, you'd be doing this up front. Ideally, you'd be putting a lot of this down on paper before the school year starts and then filling in your data later. But sometimes we're doing it after the fact, and I like to tell people that, you know, it doesn't matter if you do it before or after, as long as it gets done. It's going through the motions that really is important for students and helps us grow with our program. Okay, so that's the core curriculum action plan. That's the overall. At our high school, we have 3 goals. Should mention this. So we're actually going to have 3 core curricula action plans. So for each of our overall goals, we'll put our lessons underneath. And I'm such a visual person that I had to lay out the goals and then kind of lay out each of the lessons underneath to remind myself which goal they went underneath. Okay, so going back to my agenda, and again, I can send this agenda to anybody if you would like it. I've got hyperlinks in here. This hyperlinks to the rubric. This hyperlinks to those examples. Okay, so let's talk about the lesson plan template. Now, this is brand new. The lesson plan template has been updated. If you're familiar with RAMP and you've taken a look, the template has been added, or updated rather. Looks like my computer's gonna just take a moment there. All right. So I don't like how that looks. Can I make that look any better for you? Let's see here. Edit document. There we go. That's how I want that to look. Okay, so this is a lesson plan template. And I'm going to say the same thing with the lesson plan template. I'm not proud of this, but I've had a habit of knowing what I want to teach, even having my learning objectives in mind and going in to teach a lesson, but I haven't necessarily taken the time to write out the lesson in the lesson plan template. And I need to let you know that every time I've written a lesson in the lesson plan template, the lesson's gotten stronger. The lesson has been better for students. So taking this time either before or after is important. And you'll notice on the lesson plan template, and this is new, if you saw the old template, it didn't look like this, but it has the school counseling program goals addressed. So right there at the top, it's reminding you that this lesson should fit into the overall big picture of the goals for the program. So that's real nice. That's a new piece, and it's really helpful helping you pay attention to the big picture of you know, your school counseling program and applying for recognized ASCA model program status. Next, you'll see the ASCA student standards or the ASCA mindsets and behaviors that are being addressed. Now, this is not a session on the new ASCA mindsets and behaviors. There is a webinar. I believe it's free on the American School Counselors Association website. If you're a member, fabulous, but I don't believe you have to be a member to view it. There's a webinar there that'll give you some more information. But again, here you're going to put your ASCA mindsets and behaviors that you've addressed. And what I'll say quickly, what I've learned is that if you are getting toward the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, you probably have a component of reading, writing, or calculation. And again, I'm not proud of this, but sometimes after the fact, I'm trying to figure out which mindsets or behaviors I hit. And if I had some writing, some reading, or some calculation, I can probably get pretty close to one of them. But if I didn't have some reading, writing, or calculation, I'm going to have a difficult time addressing one of those mindsets and behaviors. So that's just how I think. And this is a shift for me. When I started in this business, we had a lot of PowerPoints, and we delivered PowerPoints, and students sat back and they watched the PowerPoints. And it's very difficult to address, I'm going to say difficult to impossible, to address the new ASCA mindsets and behaviors if you're just having passive listening on the behalf of students. You really got to have some reading and writing. Remember, those new mindsets and behaviors line up with the Common Core, so that's the reason. Next, learning objectives, and again, I can't spend a lot of time on this, but the learning objectives, you're just being very clear about what students are expected to know or be able to do. That's how I remember it. What are students able to do or know as a result of the lesson? And I always have to look up Bloom's taxonomy, or I grab a hard copy of Bloom's taxonomy. So I grab Bloom's and I think about what do I want students to know or be able to do as a result of the lesson, and usually that really helps me with the learning objectives. And some of you are very good at this. Materials is pretty straightforward. You shouldn't have any trouble with that. But again, for a reader, they'd want to know exactly what was necessary to deliver this lesson. Procedure, that's where you write out the narrative, of course. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but your process data is the number of students impacted. The perception data is it's typically your pre-post. It's that knowledge piece. And the outcome data, that gets us into the academic achievement, safety, behavior, attendance, that sort of thing. And then any follow-up that you want to do if this lesson is moving into a new lesson. So when you apply for RAMP, and this is important, if you look closely at the process, you only have to submit actually 3 of the lesson plan templates. So you've got all these lessons. You can see on the previous document how many lessons they had. You don't have to submit the lesson plan template for every one of your lessons. You just have to flashlight on a few. But as I mentioned earlier, it really helps with just personal growth to use the template for as many as possible. But that's something to pay attention to, is you only have to flashlight a few. So that's the lesson plan template. I do have some examples in our Dropbox. Again, I'll admit I'm getting better at this, but we wrote a lesson having to do with diversity, and we had students writing about diversity after reading an article on diversity. And again, this was a new set of skills for me, but I'm getting better. I'm learning and growing. So that's the lesson plan template. Are there any questions about the lesson plan template? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Go ahead. Oh, yes, we're good. Sorry, it's so hard online. And there's a delay. All right, I'll move forward. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. You can also hit me up in the chat or email me afterwards. So again, I'm just going to kind of summarize a little bit. So in this particular webinar, we just kind of want to give you a taste of what it means to be working on the school counseling core curriculum action plan, which is, again, think of it as the overall big picture of lessons that you're delivering to your students under the larger umbrella of the school program goals, which we handled in a separate webinar, and I can direct you to that if you'd like. And it's got that big picture. And then next we looked at the lesson template, and again, paying to some of those pieces that are new to some of us, which are the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, writing the school goals on there, and then this is just Brian's ideas. Try to pay attention to, does your lesson have some reading, writing, or calculation, some kind of student doing? You're probably in the ballpark. You're probably pretty darn close. Now, I did forget to show you an example, so let me kind of go backwards. So again, this is from the exemplary RAMP applications. This is an elementary. I try to mix it up. I'm not going to have a middle school today, but I try not to just focus on one level. But this is an example of an elementary lesson. You'll notice, oh, this is important. You'll notice that this is adapted, and I have found that with the ASCA templates that are on the website, they're always, they have to make them pretty general because they're for school counselors across the country, and you're probably going to find yourself adapting them. And so don't be afraid, download that Word document, but don't be afraid to adapt it, for your own uses. If your district has something that they're targeting, or you have a particular need to communicate something that's important to describe your lesson, don't be afraid to adapt the lesson. We want to keep those big rocks, but you can see that this template was adapted, and I've done that for mine as well. You'll also notice that there's some just kind of brief bits about materials here, but then the counselor went into some pretty good depth with the activity. So again, don't be afraid to do what's best for your students. Now you notice I always like to pay attention to the outcome data because that's some of the trickiest things. This was a lesson on coping skills, which would be pretty common for elementary, middle, and even high. And notice that the outcome data will be reported after 3 coping skills lessons have been taught and end of the year office discipline referrals have been analyzed. So I wish I would have planned it this way, but it's a really good example in that regard. You're not going to have your outcome data in some cases till later, especially if you're delivering a series of lessons or it's part of an overarching goal. So that's perfectly okay. The counselor knows how many students that were delivered to, 105 third graders, and they did collect some perception data, so they have an idea what they knew as a result of the lesson, but they're not going to really know if this lesson had an impact on the larger goal of office referrals until later. Okay, so going back, let's see, we already talked about that. Let me go back to my, so really we're kind of coming to a close. I'll ask again if there